It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey, everybody. Welcome in. My name is Chris. This is a thing that I make by saying words into a piece of metal. Thank you for listening, you yacht clubbers. I hope you will keep being good to each other. Please wear a mask. Please just take care of each other in all ways. The thing that you're positive is the right way to live your life. It's possible someone else doesn't feel that way. Just protect each other if you can. So you are getting a two-part free agent series on this podcast. Not exactly what I planned, but the NFL's free agency period, I think, clearly went slower than most of us thought it would. So if you want to hear about the first few days worth of signings and those big names that signed last week, listen to last week's show that I did with Jim McCormick. And then I will catch up with what has happened since Friday with some more conversation about different names today. Before I dig into one of those signings, or the implications of one of those signings here at the start, let me encourage you. We are about a month away from the NFL draft. I hope you'll check out the YouTube show. Be checking in on the YouTube show. We're doing multiple shows a week right now. I think you'll really like what we've got going on there. You can find it at youtube.com/harrisfootball. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot. Patrick Murray, who you heard as a guest on this show a couple weeks ago, he and the celebrity YouTube producers, Dave Piper, Dave Hewitt, are doing incredible work there, breaking down college film. They just posted a video on Tuesday about Alabama Heisman-winning wideout DeVonta Smith, who's going in the first round in about a month. They have one coming on Friday about North Carolina running back Javonte Williams. Tons of other videos to come. Intriguing prospects, players you're going to want to know about. So let's get I think it helps to watch these videos now. It helps us because we have a sponsor who we're trying to meet view totals with, but also I think it helps all of us to watch them just to get a sense of the players before they have teams. And then you know what happens when they all get teams, right? We all decide, we know what that landing spot means. And then we often turn out to be wrong because we do, right? So let's learn what these players are a little bit now. Check out the videos, youtube.com/harrisfootball. All right, so the biggest signing we're going to talk about on today's podcast, among some others, the biggest is Kenny Golladay landing with the Giants. I'll actually save some of my analysis for Golladay himself and what the receiving core looks like and all that for when my guest joins. But I thought I'd kick off the show today with a discussion that kind of really does become the discussion as soon as you start talking about Kenny G's new home, and that is Daniel Jones. So you probably know that Giants Twitter is, shall we say, it's an active place. And whenever I tweet something speculative about that team, the reactions, they are all over the place, right? You've got people reacting and just saying, Daniel Jones is bad. He's not going to make all those weapons in New York sing. The talk about the Giants having such an incredible offense because of all these weapons. It reminds me of what people said about the Broncos last year, and it came down to Drew Lock not being good at football. Yeah, and to that I will say, true, I can see some parallels. Remember, Cortland Sutton got hurt. I don't know if we got to see the full receiving core that we'd hoped we'd get, but still, fair point. The quarterback really matters, and I'm not the one who's going to sit here and tell you Drew Lock is good. That is not my thing. But then going in the other direction, you have the people who say, Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes, best deep ball passer rating in the league. And yeah, I don't agree with that either. Danny 10-cent piece. He made some plays down the field. He did. He had the highest adjusted completion percentage on balls that traveled 15-plus air yards. You know who was number 4 on that list? Nick Foles. Calm down. But numbers aren't going to tell us everything in that regard. I went back and I actually watched probably about half those passes on film before I started recording. One of them was to our buddy Dante Pettis for a long touchdown week 17. Hooray. And having watched him, what I can say is the 10-cent piece made some good throws, no question. He also made some big plays to wide open receivers. He had some misses that weren't great in such situations too. But I am definitely willing to concede the point that when he had time to get the ball out of his hands and throw it down the field, I don't think we watched Daniel Jones and thought, he's terrible at that. He can't do that. I think he was kind of bad at everything else. Like, when he had clean reads, when he had single coverage, when he had time to throw, open receivers, no-brainer decisions, yeah, good. He was good. But the run-of-the-mill, move the chains, quick hitting, in traffic, make a read, make a second read, he wasn't up to the standards of being a very good NFL quarterback. Just weird inaccuracy when it shouldn't happen. Definitely, I get it. The line did him no favors. It was not a good pass protecting line at all. But it was a bad short to intermediate passing game. And I think Jones has to at least bear the lion's share of the blame for that. All of which leads me to say, if you're looking at Kenny Golladay, Saquon Barkley, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, Evan Engram, and you're having that same conversation with yourself that we did about the Broncos last year, like, oh, if the quarterback comes through, right? If you're hoping that Jones can be good enough to feed all those guys, my opinion, and it's only my opinion, is that he has to be better. You have to have him improve from year 2 to year 3. Like, he wasn't good enough last year to do that. He's good enough to have a game where he spikes. We saw spikes last year. Pretty much any NFL quarterback can have spikes, right? But then Daniel Jones, if he's who he was last year, he's going to have a tough one, and it's going to wreck everybody's season, right? Just, he's mistakes, wildness throwing it, fumbles, just not enough chain-moving accuracy that kind of shows that he knows what he's doing. But, I'll say, I think Daniel Jones as a thrower in year 2 was better, for example, than Josh Allen in year 2. Josh Allen was bad as a thrower in year 2. And I wouldn't say, Daniel Jones wasn't great. He wasn't good enough, but I don't think he was that bad. And you just saw what Josh Allen did in year 3. That's a world historic leap. It would be silly to expect that from another player just because he's going in his 3rd season. Plus the questions about Allen himself are still valid. Like, can he do it again in a new season? But the point is, young players aren't finished products. And Jones can get better, even without a Josh Allen kind of leap. He could get better and really help that cast. And you saw what having Stephon Diggs did for Josh Allen. Golladay isn't the same kind of player as Diggs, but he's incredibly good, incredibly talented, and he will make plays if Jones gives him a chance. Unfortunately, I think it falls under the category of we'll have to believe it when we see it. But I don't think our mindset should be, Golladay just landed in purgatory because Jones stinks and always will stink. It's true. There are landing spots that could have been better quarterbacks, right? But Jones wasn't totally without hope last year, and we need to see if he improves. If you're going to take Golladay in the 3rd round of a fantasy draft, well, you're making a bet on him that also involves a bet on Danny 10-cent piece being better. And that might be enough to scare you off, but if it works, it could wind up giving you terrific value.
Today's kickoff.
Okay, we'll have more about Golladay himself and what else is going on with the Giants here in the main body of today's show as we talk about the other free agent signings that have happened since the end of last week. That will include JuJu and Chris Carson staying put, and Phillip Lindsay and Mike Davis finding new homes, and lots more stuff. And to help me with all of that will be my friend and yours, Brandon Funston from The Athletic. It will be fun, and I thank you very much for listening today. Your hair and skin are unique, so not all men's personal care products work for everyone. With Hawthorne, all you have to do is take a short quiz on their website and you'll get products that help you look, feel, and smell your best. Hawthorne makes it really simple. I took this quiz, asked me things like, is your skin sensitive? How many times do you shower in a week? How much do you sweat? What's your favorite drink? What's your ideal night out? And based on your answers, Hawthorne recommends a full line of self-care products from which you can pick and choose. I got soap, a facial scrub, deodorant, and they're tailored to me. Hawthorne takes the risk out of shopping for these kinds of things because they are tailored for you. Plus, if you ever get anything you don't want, send them back. Shipping and returns are always free. Take the Hawthorne quiz today and get started on your personalized self-care routine by going to hawthorne.co. And if you use the code Harris, you'll get 10% off your first purchase. HAWTHORNE.co, promo code Harris. Hawthorne.co, promo code Harris.
Today's guest.
From was being born on Yahoo back in 2007. To the Fantasy Record podcast with him and Brad Evans. It's our friend from Seattle, but don't forget his old Twitter handle. Yeah, we've got one B fun on the Harris Football Podcast today. One B fun on the Harris Football Podcast. Yeah, we've got one B fun on the
That is funny. That is new walk-up music for Brandon Funston. A reminder about your old Twitter handle, Brandon. Thank you to J-Ro. Thank you to Justin Rogers. Well done, my friend. Thank you very much, Brandon. You are actually at Brandon Funston. How are you, and how did you like that walk-up music?
Love the walk-up music. Love the Beach Boys. Yes, thank you, Justin Rogers. Anytime you want to, like I was, the previous one was David Bowie and Queen, and now I get Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. It's good company, and it's a company that I'll accept any day. So great job. Loved it.
It was funny. I liked it. We'll put it in your rotation. Of course, Brandon is a writer at The Athletic, and they do have a $1 subscription offer going on right now. So if you've been tempted by The Athletic, have a look at that. And so we haven't talked to you this offseason. How has the offseason been for you?
Yeah, I'm very immersed in fantasy baseball right now. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment, but not so immersed. I haven't been paying attention to what's been going on in free agency. And, now once we get this baseball launched, it's time to start looking at a lot of these draft prospects. So, yeah, football never rests.
It never does. And I can tell you used to work at Yahoo because you still cover fantasy baseball.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get out, but, I got editorial duties, so it takes in everything, unfortunately, and I can't purge myself of fantasy baseball completely.
You sucker. And it's funny because I know how many people listening right now love fantasy baseball and are getting ready for their drafts and play it, and I'm just over here on the sideline chuckling. Not
you're
interested.
completely out right now. You have no stake in the fantasy baseball game anymore, right?
I didn't. The last 5 years at ESPN, I didn't even. It's been more than a decade since I've covered baseball, which means it's more than a decade since I've watched a baseball game, probably. I think the Red Sox might have been in the World Series a couple times. I might have snuck a couple of games in otherwise.
But you grew up a big baseball fan.
I did. My number one sport when I was a kid, and the world has changed me and made me ADD, and I start scratching my skin, man. I cannot watch it. It is painful. I liked, honestly, covering the fantasy more than I liked the game itself. I couldn't sit there.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm in a quiet place and being honest with myself, I'm not too far removed from your sentiments there either. So,
all right, nobody from The Athletic is listening. We know that. That's for sure. They all hate this show. Hi, Nando. So, okay, we are going to talk football rather than our proclivities for sports. And again, I mentioned earlier in the show that if you want to hear conversation about the likes of the big names who've already signed, the Aguilar and Drake and Fuller and whatever, all these other guys, mostly I might ask Brandon a little bit about those guys, but we've got other names to talk about. So just listen to last week's show. The big one that we were hoping would drop before Jim McCormick came on last week, Brandon, was Kenny Golladay. Clearly the prize on the receiver market and probably the prize among all skill position guys. Got the biggest contract. Well, maybe not. Maybe Aaron Jones did, but Galladay's been a star for fantasy and otherwise on a pretty moribund team with the Lions, and he's kind of our guy around here a little bit, and now he goes to the Giants. We finally do have our answer. I'll start asking your opinion of what I talked about just a few minutes ago, the Daniel Jones dampening of enthusiasm. Like you get the news in the middle of scouting some 8th relief pitcher for the San Francisco Giants. You get the news that Kenny Golladay has signed with the New York Football Giants. Your initial brush, your thought, your first impression of, oh, good, now he's catching passes from Daniel Jones was?
That's kind of what it was. I mean, it was like, it was
not good.
I mean, that's just, we root as fantasy football players, we root for guys to land in places, I think where they can maximize their upside. And I don't, you have to kind of stretch your imagination a bit to say that he landed in a place where he can maximize his upside. I don't think it's a completely hopeless situation for him, but I look at it and I love Kenny Golladay as a player. I know you do too. I know you've kind of always kind of compared him to like an AJ Green in his prime kind of player. And, I get that completely. So, one of the premier kind of deep threat, big receivers in the league, and, a guy that you throw up a 50-50 ball and you expect it to be better than 50-50 for him. So here's what I'll say about what I think of his landing spot. I mean, look at 2019, you look at a big receiver like Darius Slayton, who was a rookie, had some big moments. What was the Giants like then? Well, they had Saquon Barkley. They had some guys around him, but they had an offensive line that was at least serviceable. And if you look at like Pro Football Focus's pass blocking ranking of the Giants offensive line, and you can say what you want about whether you think that's a fair ranking or not, or like, it's subjective or, whatever that means, but they ranked them 32nd, which means that even if they're
terrible,
even if they're off, it's still terrible. Right. Yeah. So we have to imagine that the Giants are able to somehow, put together a better pass blocking unit, that Saquon Barkley is there to give the defenses something to think about in the backfield. And then you got to hope that Daniel Jones is in his third season is just at least a little bit better. And if all these stars align, then it might not be such a bad place for Kenny Golladay.
So that's, my question was, you answered more than my question, which is great. My question kind of was about Jones. Where did you come down on Daniel Jones by the end of last year? Just tell me your Jones evaluation.
My thought was that I think it was incomplete because I thought it was such a bad situation. I still think that he's a guy that if you're the coach or the general manager of the Giants, you look at a guy whose decision making is often questionable. He's not a good custodian of the football. Be it fumbles or interceptions, it's still too shaky. But I still think that there's in the best of moments where you can give him the best of environments, he can be a decent NFL quarterback. I'm not a big fan, but
Yeah, that's mostly what it's kind of unfair that I'm putting you on this, but you said mostly what I said off the top of the show, and that of course controls largely what we're going to wind up thinking about Golladay. I've said this earlier, but I've heard people say, but don't you look at the numbers? He was actually a great deep ball thrower. Cool. And then the Kenny Golladay haters will say, yeah, but Golladay doesn't separate from anybody. He's not, and my thing is always, well, I don't need him to separate. He's open when he's covered.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Exactly.
It's not the best situation, there's no question, but among the likely candidates of places that we're going to get him, sure, were people at some point talking Bengals and Joe Burrow? Okay, well, I probably would have preferred that, yes. But people were talking Washington. I don't want him in Washington. People are talking about Baltimore. I don't want him in Baltimore, right?
In Chicago.
In Chicago, my goodness, with Allen Robinson, right. No thanks. So, it isn't the best of all worlds. It's not Matthew Stafford. It has to be considered a little bit of a downgrade, situation-wise. It has to be, no question. And the question is going to be how much. And we don't really know yet. We have so many receivers that are going to get taken early in this upcoming draft and going to change the landscape. Let's watch the Giants draft a receiver, and we'll all be like, I kind of set the metric off the top of the show as round 3. Round 3 seems like the highest you could take Kenny Golladay, but there might be some people who say, I just don't. There's so many receivers, and many of them play with much more proven quarterbacks. I don't want to have to take Kenny Golladay at pick 30 when I can get him. If I could get him at 48, I'm fine. But at 30, if I could get Allen Robinson instead, and maybe that's not realistic. I wonder, to take him at 30, you're almost going to have to buy a Daniel Jones improvement as much as you're buying Golladay.
Yeah, well, I think it's Daniel Jones improvement. It's an offensive line improvement. It's Saquon Barkley, and a legit threat of play action and things like that, and all the little things. But you do have to throw Daniel Jones improvement into there as well. I was just trying to imagine how many receivers would be gone in round 3, and if I was with you on that, but I'm guessing that it's probably in the, I don't know, wide receiver 17 to wide receiver 22 range. Does that sound about right?
Which is after round 3. Yeah.
That's after round 3. Okay, yeah.
I'm pretty sure because running backs, in most sane leagues, and you're going to get Kelsey to go and you're going to get quarterbacks to go and whatever. I think in most leagues that's late. Well, we'll see. It's all sort of, me, I don't love doing this talk to start because I don't have ranks yet. I wouldn't do
I don't either. I was just imagining how many receivers would be
Sure,
there.
it's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think probably obviously this is way too early. I'm thinking I'm going to end up ranking him somewhere in the 15 to 20 range at wide receiver. Probably not a wide receiver 1, but a perfectly fine wide receiver 2. But
not the typical, it's just like if it goes right, it could go so much better for him than if it goes right for some other dude who's ranked next to him.
Sure.
Because he's elite in terms of talent. All right, so I'll stay with the big, tall wide receiver, and how about one who isn't as good at football? JuJu Smith-Schuster goes to nowhere, stays with Pittsburgh, and I think his supporters would have imagined a career for JuJu a lot like Kenny Golladay's. They certainly, you called Darius Slayton tall at whatever he is, 6'1", and it's fair. He was definitely playing on the outside. Kenny Golladay is a different kettle of fish in terms of size and burliness and all that stuff. And JuJu would fit into that mode too, and yet, at least how the Steelers have used him to this point, you don't get to see him on the outside that much. He's certainly been the possession guy. It does make me wonder why the Steelers are running it back. It didn't work great, but I wonder what it feels like it's. I've been wrong on JuJu, and then I've been very right twice on JuJu, and it feels like maybe, if anything, it just goes, okay, Deontay Johnson can calm down now. Chase Claypool can calm down now.
Yeah, I was looking at it from because I was talking about this earlier with my colleague at The Athletic, Jake Seeley, who and we did a podcast, and I was talking about the rationale for JuJu, who is crazy young for how many years he's been in the league. I think he's 24 right now. Maybe he'll play. He'll turn 25 late next season. So you got one more year. You did have 97 catches and 9 touchdowns. Now, you had like the lowest average depth of target among all regular receivers by a long shot. I was looking it up. Kyle Juszczyk averaged, more yards per target than JuJu Smith-Schuster. But if you're just a 24-year-old who's, playing one more year out under a 1-year deal, waiting for, the salary caps to bloom and all this stuff, like you go back to a system that and you can sell – your agent, I'm assuming, can sell 25 years old coming off your second 90-plus catch season. Maybe you score another 8-9 touchdowns like you did. Like that's what they're gonna do, and you can sell that JuJu's still in his prime and still has plenty of potential. So I think it was like just go back to the place that and put up your numbers and so that's I'm imagining that's maybe what the rationale was for JuJu. I don't know what the rationale. I don't know what the rationale was for Pittsburgh.
That's what I'm saying. That's really what I'm focused on is and those numbers are hollow, man. Those numbers are
big time.
Like 30 of those catches came in the last 3 weeks of the season. 3 of those touchdowns came in the last 3 weeks of the season. He was a disaster. He was a 2-catch guy, a 3-catch guy a few times.
But I get that. But was he a disaster, or is Ben Roethlisberger a disaster? Was the Pittsburgh Steelers a disaster?
He's a disaster. He's a disaster because it's not it. Chase Claypool didn't just run past him in the pecking order. He vaulted. He vaulted 7 feet over his head, and Deontay Johnson is the number one. And we can say Ben wasn't good, and he probably wasn't good occasionally. He probably wasn't, but I'll just say
he wasn't good. He can't throw the ball downfield anymore. And again, I get back to the rationale for JuJu. It makes a whole lot of sense. You're not gonna get more attention than with this Ben Roethlisberger right now if you look across the league. So
I'll just say, I don't think that's true because I think short passing is the NFL right now. And you say he didn't make any plays down the field, and then we look at Chase Claypool and we go, well, he made some.
He made some, yeah.
He made enough. And my point is just the reason I say it's a problem with JuJu is that a different receiver with a different set of skills wouldn't have been bypassed by these 2 young guys. He very clearly has been and turned into this possession dude where I was told when Antonio Brown left that JuJu was going to become the outside receiver, going to become this downfield. I just don't think it's in him.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that at all. I think he may have made his bet as a slot receiver and something that he's going to have to, deal with for the rest of his career. So, yeah, it's definitely weird. I've been definitely disappointed because I was a big JuJu fan when Antonio Brown was there and he was, the quote unquote number 2, but the team MVP and sent Antonio Brown into a tizzy. But I expected a lot more coming off of that season. And he used to be a guy like early on in his career, he would make big plays downfield. I mean, he was kind of a fun player to watch. It's certainly, it's weird to call a guy a shadow of his former self when you're 24 years old, but that's kind of where he's at.
Hey, this spring, as you finally get back outdoors to explore, take Bespoke Post on all your adventures with a new line of essential Box of Awesome collections for guys, guaranteed to upgrade your life. All through this past year, I've gotten my Box of Awesome. Truly, it's like a small gift to yourself every month. You get that package, you find something that's just cool. Bespoke Post sends fun, useful stuff for style, for grooming, barware, cookware, outdoor gear. Honestly, it's fun. And, it's actually a good gift that I've given to other guys as well. I recently got the Snug Box, which has a camping blanket and some other camping equipment. It's a fun subscription that you'll love getting each month. You can also skip a month. You can cancel anytime. It's not any kind of big commitment. Really, it's for fun. So you start out by going to boxofawesome.com and you take a quiz. Your answers will help them find the right Box of Awesome for you. They release new boxes in various categories every month. $45 will get you a box, and you get more than $70 of gear in that box. Plus, get 20% off your first monthly box when you sign up at boxofawesome.com. Use the promo code Harris at checkout. That's boxofawesome.com. Promo code Harris for 20% off your first box. All right, we're back with Brandon. We are talking about some more of these free agents who now have homes, and you're in Seattle, and I'm not going to get you to say bad words about this dude, but Chris Carson also re-signed. We talked about JuJu re-signing. Chris Carson returns to Seattle after testing the market and finding it wanting, apparently. We've talked about Carson enough for me to know that you really, really like him.
I do like him. I especially liked him compared to what was left in free agency, and he signed, and Leonard Fournette's still out there, and James Conner. But like, if I'm as a fan, I 1,000% wanted Chris Carson back. And this is a team that has 3 draft picks, so you can't look at the draft and say, well, you can use one and get younger there. I mean, maybe they could have, but there's a lot of needs for the Seattle team, and if you can get Chris Carson at something below what you thought maybe you could, or I think Seattle knew that Chris Carson would go out there and not get paid. I mean, he's a guy who's had injury issues. He's getting on the wrong side of the age that you want your lead running back to be. So I think Seattle knew that there was going to be an opportunity to bring him back at some not an exorbitant price, and that's exactly what happened. And I'm totally fine with that because Chris Carson is solid. I think he's rock solid. He's not going to be the reason you don't, win or lose games for Seattle. So I think it's great. I do like Chris Carson. Nothing's changed.
I was told he was really good. I was told he was a really good player. Cousin Josh comes on here and tells me, "Oh man, he gets hot flashes when he watches him." I think he's fine.
I'm just gonna say, just don't go poking the bear too much here on Chris Carson with me. I will. I'm ready to defend him. I'm ready to pounce. I'm trying to play nice, but
So what I'll say is, he is not Jordan Howard. He is not just a bruiser who has no oomph to him. He absolutely has oomph. He has. I mean, his people know my stance on Chris Carson. It's not a coincidence he gets hurt. The way he's good is by being the craziest MF on the field.
Yeah.
He is no absolutely crazy, has no regard for himself. Every other week, I think he's hurt. I watch the film and I'm like, oh, he's hurt. Like, what's going to happen here? And he's tough. He's a tough dude. But he looks concussed. I'm always saying on the show, like, I think he got a concussion. I think he was out for a quarter, but they brought him back. I remember the hip injury, right? He suffered the hip injury. They held him out for a quarter, the one that ended 2 years ago, right? And he came back in, and he wound up needed reconstructive surgery on the damn hip. He's tough. right? I mean, he's a tough guy, but I don't know, man. How many years are we going to do this with Carson as a fantasy entity? I'm not going to argue his worth they didn't pay him very much money. I'm not going to argue his worth as a member of the Seahawks. He's got worth. You can't count on Rashad Penny, and otherwise it's a bunch of spare parts. But can you count on Chris Carson? How many years in a row are we going to do this? Oh, it's okay. Take Carson in the second round, because however long he's in there, you're good. And then don't worry, when he gets hurt, there's going to be, and it never works out to be the guy you think, and you just kind of get stuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think the over/under is one more year. Can you get 2 more, good years? And let's call what he's done the last 3 years good years. If you can get 12, I would hope 13, 14 games each of the next 2 years, and they're productive like they've been the last 2 years. That's a win. But I think you're right. I think you have to count on at least 2, 3, 4 DMPs, and you got to hope that Rashad Penny has something, in him after coming back from the big ACL injury. Obviously, they gave him a little bit of run last year. He got a little bit of feet wet again, but hopefully with a whole nother offseason, we'll see something similar to what we saw from him before he suffered the big injury, and that will be their, back to being the insurance play again.
Right. I mean, are we really going back to handcuffs? That's kind of not really a thing in the NFL anymore in fantasy. And
well, I'm not saying that if you have Chris Carson on your fantasy team that you should handcuff Rashad Penny. I'm just saying from the Seattle perspective, it's going to be what? Rashad Penny or Alex Collins when Chris Carson goes down. And I do think that you got to plan for a few games next year of no Chris Carson.
Yes.
And so I'm saying as a Seattle fan, and it's, I guess, hopefully Rashad Penny has something to give when that time comes.
Right. It's just taking Carson where you're going to have to take him. And because he should, if he gives you full 16 games, he gets a lot of work. No NFL scheme can really be considered run-oriented, but we understand that in the scheme of what happens out there, to even be 45 to 50% run is a good thing for a running back because it's more work than a lot of running backs get. They're very confident in him at the goal line. He's a tough SOB. He's going to get tons of work and not come off the field when he has to. He's a pretty good pass receiver for a big guy. A lot can go right, which is why he's probably going to have this draft stock that I'm not going to want to. Because
I don't think his draft stock is going to be that high price at all. I think he'll actually be undervalued. I think you're going to be looking at David Montgomery, Melvin Gordon, kind of in that range. Maybe Ronald Jones if they don't sign anybody else. So I think you're looking at kind of around RB 20 to 24 range. So I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with that price.
Round 3, round 4. I bet it. I might even have him higher than that. I don't know. There's a lot of folks who love Chris Carson.
I've been kind of playing around with this running back rankings lately. It's pretty deep. I mean, you get, especially
they're all the same is the problem. Cool. Do I believe in DeAndre Swift? I think he's really good, but there's a lot of things that could go wrong there. Do I believe in there are
Antonio Gibson or
sure.
Josh Jacobs now with Kenyon Drake there.
Right. Yeah. Well,
stupid Raiders.
I'm gonna me. I'm gonna like Jacobs more than.
Well, I am too. But that's a whole other story because I don't know what the Raiders are doing this offseason. So.
Yeah, you could definitely join the club. All right. Well, so it's interesting. It's a hard challenge to face when you're sitting there at the draft table in whatever it's going to be, 5 months, right? And the Chris Carson neighborhood comes up, and you go, man, I'm signing up for so much pain. I'm signing his physical pain and my intellectual pain. Okay, we can probably tackle some more running backs in less depth here and get some quick hit thoughts on what signings do to incumbents, because that's really what the rest of these names at running back are. Although Phillip Lindsay is an awfully good player, and the Broncos were like, we would love to keep you if you would continue to be paid nothing. And he was like, I don't want to do that. And they said, all right, you're out of here. And he goes, unfortunately, he goes to Houston, who they might not have their great quarterback, and they still have David Johnson there. And I don't know. My feeling about Phillip Lindsay is that last year, if you asked me who was better between David Johnson and Phillip Lindsay, it's not close.
Yeah. Well, do you think Phillip Lindsay looks at Mark Ingram and David Johnson and says, man, I love the thought of me getting into training camp in Houston and juxtaposing my skills with those guys, and hopefully that, I mean, well, not hopefully, I don't care. I mean, if it doesn't stand out, it doesn't stand out, but I would expect that would be a sharp contrast that would be noticeable. And maybe we get, a sleeper in Lindsay where he ends up as, kind of the cream rises to the top situation. And he's more youthful. He's more vital than those guys at this point in their careers. But I just, it's Texas. It's the Texans now. And if there's no Deshaun Watson and there's no Will Fuller, and then this is a house of cards. It's crumbling down.
Yeah. How are his humors? I know he's vital, but how are his humors?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm with you. The situation might not wind up being great, but I'm always constantly told, that's all right. There's still work out there. Someone's got to score touchdowns. Someone's got, so it's just worth keeping. Or I don't think Mark Ingram's going to factor, frankly, much at all. We'll see. Maybe he will. And Phillip Lindsay's problem has always been he plays like a much bigger player. He's someone else who's likely to get hurt and doesn't really do third down blocking and hasn't been given the opportunity to catch a lot of passes. So it's like, man, is Mark Ingram your third down back? I don't know. He seems like the one with the better pass blocking and better receiving. So interesting. Tevin Coleman, a late addition to the list. He goes to the Jets. He is a turkey mayo, as everybody listens to this show knows. But I don't know. I mean, they might be bad, Brandon, but don't you know there's no one else there? So Tevin Coleman's going to be great this year.
Tevin Coleman can go anywhere. He's not going to be great. He's just not great. You can't. It's such a perfect place. Such a perfect place for him to go. But I mean, the Jets. It's time for them to draft. Put some stock in somebody. Draft somebody. Higher profile. Because it feels like they just do this every year. I mean, the Le'Veon Bell that they signed was not too far away. At that point in his career, from the kind of player that Tevin Coleman is,
But we didn't know that. I mean, he hadn't played in a year. Like, I got to give him credit for trying on Le'Veon Bell, right? They tried.
Oh, absolutely. I think they thought it was going to work out better than that, right, as well.
You're referring to like the LaMichael Pirines of the world. Like, we got to be running back, and everyone talks himself into LaMichael Pirine being great, and then we watch him run, and we go, oh, he's fine. He's just a little guy who was a nice guy. He's fine. Like,
right.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I just it's been patchwork for a while there.
It can't. Your point is it can't be just Tevin Coleman. That can't be the answer. He's reuniting with old offensive coordinators that he's known and stuff, and at some point there will be a better name there. And
that's exactly my point.
Tend to agree. How about Mike Davis going to Atlanta?
Deja vu all over again.
Sure. I mean, he started. Well, even you would come on the show with me years ago when he was in Seattle, and I would be like, I really think Mike Davis is good, and you'd be like, okay. I don't think you had a strong take one way or the other.
I actually like the Mike Davis in Seattle was the best Mike Davis. I mean, he had his best years there. I was fine with Mike Davis. He's actually, decent amount of athleticism. He's got a high motor. He's a little bit kind of, he's kind of just pinballs. Doesn't have a lot of nuance to his running style, but he's not easy to take down. I like him. I think
strong as hell.
Yeah, he's strong as hell. Jake Seeley called him the Ryan Fitzpatrick of the running back position. I think he just meant that from he's your bridge running back until they get somebody better. And right. I think that's fair in that respect. But I do expect this to be just, we talked about Davis a year ago or 2 years ago in Chicago. And, for about a month, we imagined him being Chicago's main guy. And then they drafted Montgomery. And I really think Atlanta's, they're on the same track as well.
Maybe somebody else coming. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, he did a nice job. He did a very good job at first with the Panthers, but it wore off. Yep. Yeah, it did wear off. I mean, he himself wore down a little bit. He's a favorite of the show, just a favorite fun discovery, but probably shouldn't be the Falcons starter. If he wound up being the Falcons starter with a bunch of other, and I assume Todd Gurley's not coming back. You can tell me whether there was anything else in that mess in Atlanta's backfield that interested you last year.
No. I mean,
he would be the cream of it.
He would absolutely. And
Brian Hill, Ito Smith, those guys.
I'd like him better than any of those guys. I mean, Todd Gurley had value because he was scoring a bunch of touchdowns early on. But I think from just I'd expect much better overall. I mean, he can be a 3-down back. I guess you saw it in Carolina. It wore out over time, but I think he's better than what they had last year. But I think they're going to reach higher than that.
Okay, and then one more name is Damien Williams going to the Bears, which maybe you'll say actually that has more impact. We haven't, Damien Williams did what Le'Veon Bell did, took a year off, right? He did it because of COVID.
Yeah.
Do you view what you know of Damien Williams' talent as a threat to what's his face?
Montgomery. Yeah. I think the bigger threat might be to Tariq Cohen. I don't think Tariq Cohen's that good. I think he's kind of, he was fun at first. I think that's kind of worn off a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they want to use Williams more as a guy that spells Montgomery, but is used more often in the passing game. And like Tariq Cohen has not been that productive in the passing game. Yeah, he's been a catch accumulator, but he hasn't really done a whole lot with that. And I think that the Tariq Cohen as like a glorified backup, those days might just be over.
So David Montgomery, this is my question for multiple choice. You have two choices. David Montgomery, RB6 or RB7?
Let's see, is none of the above?
No, that's it. Great RB6? Running back or the greatest running back?
Yeah, no. I gotta go. I gotta go with door number C. Door number 3.
Haven't you seen the numbers?
No, I have not.
You haven't seen that David Montgomery was like RB4 in fantasy last year or whatever he was?
Yes, I know. I was. I know you don't like this, but I mean, it's hard not to look at the matchups and.
No, it's very in arrears. I can look at the matchups 100%. I am not going to complain at all.
Because there is a clear delineation between the first 9 games and then the biggest cakewalk of cakewalk final 6 games. And I'm sure you've meted this out plenty of times on this show over the last several weeks. So I won't dive into too much detail on it again.
One more break to say we are sponsored by Brooklinen. I have towels from Brooklinen, almost unbelievably plush. I have sheets and pillowcases from Brooklinen. They feel like luxury, but without a steep price. I have a duvet cover from Brooklinen. Absolutely love it. And Brooklinen is also selling comforters. If you're in the market for a new comforter, check them out. They come in lightweight, all season, and ultra warm. And one thing that's very cool is they offer a variety of materials in their comforters, including an eco-friendly down alternative. I sleep with a down alternative duvet. I absolutely love it. It's great in all weather. There is a reason Brooklinen has over 75,000 5-star reviews. They only rep really great stuff. They are all online, so you're cutting out the retail middleman. Everything is coming at a fair price. Treat yourself to the ultimate comfort with Brooklinen's Comforter Collection. Go to brooklinen.com. Use the promo code HarrisFootball to get $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. That's BROOKLINEN.com. Enter promo code HarrisFootball for $25 off with a minimum purchase of $100. Brooklinen.com. Promo code HarrisFootball. Okay, we're back with Brandon, and we're going to talk about some wide receivers who have signed, and then I'll ask him about a couple other guys too. T.Y. Hilton, another receiver who stays with his old team, a little more understandable that he wouldn't have as big a market, that the kind of market he was looking for, than, say, JuJu. I think JuJu doesn't get the big contract because I think people are looking at him and go, I don't think he's Golladay. I don't think he's worth Golladay money. And so he went scrambling back to Pittsburgh, and he needs to prove he is, like, to get the really big receiver contract. Whereas with Hilton, pretty far over the wrong side of 30, he was never going to get a great big deal. Carson Wentz is probably, no matter what you think of Carson Wentz in Indianapolis, he's going to be better than Phillip Rivers was last year. In some respects, though, maybe the question is less about T.Y. and more about how you feel like his return affects the young guys. Let's say Michael Pittman, just for the sake of he seems to be first on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Michael Pittman's got a big step, up that he is likely to take this year. And man, if Paris Campbell ever played a full season, I'd be really interested in him because I've in short stints I've liked some things that he's flashed, and he's very interesting to me. I just think Ty is at that point. He's at his wrong side of 30. He's dealt with nagging injuries like his entire career, and give him credit because if he can possibly play, he usually does. But I think as far as just being kind of that sudden threat, I think he's lost a bit of a step. And I would expect that, he's at a point where he's, the number 2 option, that Michael Pittman is a good chance to take over as kind of the go-to option in the passing game. I think he could be fantasy serviceable, possibly. If he's, I wouldn't be opposed to having him be one of my bench receivers if everything trends in the right direction over the summer. But
right.
Yeah, that's my sell on T.Y. Hilton. What do you think? Are you buying?
I think to buy any non-star, he's not a star anymore, and to buy any non-star receiver, you're really making a bet on the quarterback. You're making a bet on the offense. You need ancillary guys to blow up, and it's. I'm probably a little more forgiving of Wentz's season than almost anybody I've talked to, but even I am not guaranteeing he's immediately 20, whatever, 17 or 16 or whatever Carson Wentz. There's trust to be restored there. He used to have a really good offensive line 3 years ago. He had a really good offensive line in Philly. And these last 2, he's had a very, very injured offensive line, and he's clearly not capable of functioning behind a line that's not blocking well. But he's going someplace that we never know from year to year, but it wasn't probably as good in 2020 as it was in 2019, but it's still good, has a lot of good players. And if Wentz turns back into the 4,500, 30 touchdown guy, Hilton's going to benefit. Because you might be right that he's not elite burner, but I saw in the second half of this past year when he got healthy, I'm remembering that Texans game where he went bananas, and then scored a couple touchdowns against the Raiders. He still gets open, I'll put it that way. So I think all that was a long way of agreeing with you that there's a chance, and that if you're willing to make a bet on Wentz, you might go 11th round T.Y. Hilton. I'll say I think it probably, anytime a veteran comes back and still has something left, there's target share to be taken, but it's a crutch argument to say that's an automatic bad thing for Pittman or anyone else there. You could easily say Hilton's going to take the top off the defense and make underneath stuff more available for Pittman. So Pittman should certainly go in drafts above Hilton. I'm not sold that Pittman is definitely a round 6 guy. I don't know about that. We'll kind of have to see.
Well, and I think I agree with you. I think Carson Wentz certainly has a chance to be good again. I don't indict him. That was a mess there in Philly, and I still think Carson Wentz is a talented quarterback, and maybe Frank Reich's the guy to bring it back. But the other thing about this, is there's nobody here that's clearly going to be commanding targets. It's a pretty narrow. It's a pretty narrow tree of options.
Even Pittman. Pittman didn't do enough last year to make me go, I'm positive he's a great player. He had a couple of pop games. I did some film work on him. He was not beating man coverage. It's clear it's all good, talented, athletic young receivers come in, and if you get him in a zone and they catch the ball, he's a freight train, right? He's a scary dude in the open field. He could be terrific. He could be nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly, there is a not terrible chance that T.Y. Hilton comes back and he is the leading target getter on this team. So as I say, I won't be completely disinterested for fantasy purposes. I can't imagine at this point imagining that I want to draft him as one of my top 3 receivers.
Oh, no. Yeah. You're not going to have to. Agreed.
No.
But it's interesting because that whole situation is going to be interesting because what we're looking for are areas where other folks are super down because they're positive the situation is going to be terrible. And if we see a glimmer of hope and we can get guys at good value, cheap, and maybe the Colts is one of them. If there's enough hate for Carson Wentz, there's going to be a big pro Carson Wentz PR machine come out in full force for all the Colts beat reporters and all the coaches saying marvelous things about him, right? So we're going to have to weed through some of that, but
sure.
Couple other names that we're not drafting, but interesting. Well, Josh Reynolds goes to Tennessee, right? And he had a lot of opportunities with the Rams to do something consistently, and every so often he would flash and then he would just vanish, even when other guys were hurt. Kupp has been gone a lot over the years, and Reynolds was never able to take advantage, but he takes the Corey Davis slot, which, like it or not, and I don't, occasionally had some value. You can't argue that Tannehill didn't produce multiple receivers every so often that had, I'm very skeptical of that whole offense. I continue to be. I think we saw what it turns into when against good defenses and against good teams and stuff. But I don't know any interest about Reynolds taking the Corey Davis spot.
Yeah, I mean he's not. I mean the Corey Davis is obviously a more complete receiver than him, and I think there's just not a lot of target upside. He's going to benefit from, there's going to benefit from play action. He's going to benefit from AJ Brown drawing the tougher assignments, just like Corey Davis did. But I think he's just going to do it to a lesser extent because he's not as good a receiver as Corey Davis. DeSean
Jackson goes to the Rams, and so great for the 10th straight year. I can have people telling me I'm too low on DeSean Jackson. I can't wait.
In theory, it makes sense, right? Like you need a deep threat because you like to throw those. I mean, and we'll see how much the offense changes with Matt Stafford, and but they like to run Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp underneath in those kind of those crossing routes. And if you can at least have DeSean Jackson on the field, threatening to be the guy that can blow the cover off the defense, it only helps Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. But that's the big question. I mean, how many games and how many times can he actually be on the field?
Yeah, and I don't even know if it even helps. I mean, again, it's a crutch argument, right? Like but isn't he taking all the touchdowns? If he's scoring 8 long touchdowns, doesn't that hurt? Like we never know, right? It could go one way or it could go the other. The larger point, of course, is that he's never.
I'll just say I'm a Seahawks fan, and I was happy with the signing.
I love it.
Just tells you how.
Doesn't that tell you everything? Like, go ahead, rely on that doofus. Go ahead. Exactly. He's a knucklehead. You go ahead, buddy. I love it. So let's see. You mentioned that we still have a couple of running backs who are outstanding. We still don't have landing spots for James Conner or for Leonard Fournette. So there's nothing really to. I don't know. We'll talk about them if and when they sign, but like in the context of a free agency signing show, there's just not that much to say except for it's fairly obvious what the market thinks of them.
It is. And I was just looking across the league, and there's probably, I mean, depending on what you think of Mike Davis, there's maybe 4 places where like a James Conner or a Leonard Fournette could land, and you'd be like, oh, okay, he could be the featured guy there, and that might give him some value. And one of them's back in Pittsburgh, and then the other one's Miami or Atlanta or Arizona, if you don't believe Arizona is really going to lean on Chase Edmonds. So there's 4 places. Everywhere else has a legit running back that, is better than what those 2 guys are. So maybe you could argue in a few different places, but those are the places where you got a decent amount of workload that might be available.
You didn't say Jets. Did you say Jets?
Well, I had the Jets. Actually, I had the Jets, but they signed Coleman.
Tevin Coleman,
I don't see them signing another kind of, blah veteran.
Right. And the truth is that the draft comes first, and there are 2 very good running backs in this draft, and then a bunch of other serviceable, interesting part type guys, role player types or platoon types, and they're cheaper. No matter what, they're going to be probably cheaper. So honestly, probably the Conner and Fournette, won't land with those 4 teams. They'll land somewhere random, and we'll be like, oh, great, he's with the Bengals. Cool, thanks, Joe Mixon. It'll be that kind of thing. Certainly more likely than not. I've already we've talked about Kenyon Drake and what the hell the Raiders are doing. So I'm well known as I made Drake a flag player 3 seasons ago, two seasons, I can't remember. But I've been off the bandwagon since. No one's going to come on the show and say that he's as good a player as Josh Jacobs. Is he a good player?
He's a good backup. Like he's, you can quote unquote luxury backup. I give him that.
Okay.
But yeah, just tell me what you think they're doing. Is he just replacing Devontae Booker? And he's, is he?
But he spent money.
Is he replaced? Are they just out on Josh Jacobs as a receiver, and they want to dial that back, and they're going to give him a 3rd down role? I don't get it. And not only that, they've gotten rid of like all their offensive linemen. So I don't know what's going on with the Raiders. I don't know what their plan is, but it seems like they've decided they want to give the ball to Josh Jacobs at least a little bit less. And
maybe that's right. It's hard to say. It's hard to know. I mean, I would have signed James White for half the money if I wanted to, a third down back, a pure receiving back who's going to be the pure complement. It's hard. It's a hard thing to understand. We're either going to get burned drafting Jacobs in the second round, or we're going to laugh and love our lives if we take him in the second round. I don't think Drake is enough to make people go, Josh Jacobs, not a top 50 pick. I just don't. But he might not perform as one if it winds up being tons and tons of Kenyon Drake, which is totally gross. Nelson Aguilar goes to the Patriots, and I spend a week fending off Raider fans because I'm not a Nelson Aguilar fan at all. It's funny, Dave Hewitt, celebrity YouTube producer, was talking to me about these shows, and he's like, do you think that free agency is specifically targeting you, Chris, and all of the players you don't like? I'm just all these players I'm not that fond of. Aguilar didn't sign for giant money, so I'm not saying but I wouldn't have signed. I don't want him on the team. I am a Patriot fan. I don't know. It's not
you are a Patriot fan. Okay.
Of course. Yeah. You forgot.
Yep.
I'm appreciative of the fact that he proved that his one good year in Philadelphia is repeatable in terms of being a cool deep threat, a DeSean Jackson type, a Ted Ginn type. Cool. But the rest of it, man, don't be relying on him to do anything.
I think, and obviously it takes two to tango, and I just think the other person in this equation is Cam Newton, and I just I don't like it, and there's Cam Newton apologists out there in spades, and I'm sorry, before he had COVID, I didn't think he was a great passer, and it's only gotten worse. It's like the football is metal and the earth is a giant magnet, and it's and it just torpedoes into the ground. And when they made the signings for Jonnu and Hunter Henry, I'm like, that makes sense because put some good options in his wheelhouse, and I think his wheelhouse now is a very shortened field. And so Nelson Aguilar, whatever, I think that's a wasteland for his skill set.
Yeah, I still kind of think part of me thinks they're going to wind up with someone else. They're going to figure out a way to trade up to whatever, and get a rookie or something. It just seems crazy because I thought he was okay in September, but after COVID, I thought his arm looked like it was hurt again. And
there was the Seahawks game, and I don't know how to explain that anomaly, but he looked amazing,
great,
and it wasn't just a bunch of short passes in that game. He was making amazing throws to Julian Edelman pretty far downfield, and I didn't know what was going on, but there is that. So there you can put in film of Cam from that game, and you can make that argument, and I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, me neither. Lastly, I'll just say Will Fuller had been, maybe among the biggest receivers to have signed to that point when he did sign with Miami. Another player that I probably have been lower on than everybody, but I respect what Fuller does. I think he's like a better version of that, of what we've been talking about, the deep threat. He's probably a little more wiggle to him, a little more versatility. Sometimes we'll take a wide receiver screen along way, but he is mostly, let's face it, I'm dandying it up. He's a speed guy. He going from Deshaun Watson to almost anyone else in the league is a downgrade. So we like Will Fuller less probably. So maybe the question is much more about Tua than it is about Fuller.
I think it's fascinating. It's one of the more curious signings. And to me, it's like, okay, you have Tua. You see him all the time. We saw him last year be a dink and dunker, and if you saw Tua last, you would say, well, Juju's the guy that you need, a guy that lives 4 to 5 yards downfield but they went out and they signed maybe, outside of Kenny Golladay, the second best deep threat among free agents. And so to me, it tells me they think that Tua has the ability to open things up this year and to take advantage of that. Otherwise, why do you make that signing? And so I think it's an experiment. We'll see if it works out. But yeah, I'm absolutely with you. There's no way it's an upgrade for Will Fuller.
No. I mean, clearly a downgrade no matter what, just because Watson's great, and clearly there's stuff going on with Watson that is well beyond football that we're not talking about right now. But I love your point. I hope it's true. I'm in the tank for Tua, so I hope it does wind up coming to fruition, and maybe it does mean good things of what the Dolphins see from Tua in practice and stuff. All right, well, Brandon, this was lovely. It was wonderful to have you on in the offseason. I hope you'll follow Brandon on his new walk-up music has the wrong Twitter handle. Don't go to that one. Go to @BrandonFunston. It's really easy to find him there. And by all means, everybody feel free to keep contributing walk-up music because Brandon likes it. Has to be classic rock or Brandon will turn up his nose. No, he didn't care. Thank you.
You know that's not true, but it was nice to get a nice little fantasy football vacation in the midst of my baseball deluge. So I appreciate it.
You poor sucker. I will text you soon and I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
And thank you so much for listening. I always want to thank you because without you, this show could not happen. Also, it could not happen without the sponsors. So I wanted to thank Hawthorne and Bespoke Post and Brooklinen, which is a motley assortment of fun things, of useful and fun things that I would love if you have the means and the interest to do so. You can investigate and use our promo codes and URLs because that is how the show keeps going. If you can find your way clear to support the sponsors, that means they come back. You're not putting you're not like buying one box of awesome and then all of a sudden I'm getting $10 or something. That's not how it works. But Bespoke Post has been around a long time. So clearly a lot of listeners have taken us up on that one, and Brooklyn and Hawthorne as well. We do thank them very much. That's going to do it for this week. What's coming up next week, you asked? I don't know, but it will be something. For your continued college football scouting enjoyment in video form, please continue to go to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/HarrisFootball. We're going to do 4 straight draft content shows starting week after next. So next week's a little bit of a wild card. I'm going to think about film stuff. If you want to email me suggestions, hey, harris@harrisfootball.com. We'll come up with a good show of a guest and probably do some film on some players that I don't know who yet. But, all in due time. Don't be impatient. I'll figure it out. Until then, thank you again very much for listening. Your hat continues to be extremely awesome. I will talk to you next week.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.